Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. The government sets out plans for the overhaul of the water system, but what will it mean for agriculture?
I think it's absolutely vital to have farmers round the table to look at the ways in which pollution can be controlled.
We'll have more on that a little later. First today, glyphosate, a commonly used weed killer sold as Roundup, as well as under other brand names, has long been controversial. Roundup's manufacturers have faced many lawsuits in the USA for allegedly causing cancer in people. Here in the UK, the chemical mixture is used widely by local authorities for clearing up weeds and by farmers. In regenerative farming, it's used to kill off cover crops which are planted to improve soil health. The Health and Safety Executive is currently reviewing whether glyphosate should still be used in the UK and, if so, whether the safety threshold should be changed. The Soil Association hosted a discussion on the issue. I spoke to the panellists afterwards. First, Professor Michael Antoniou from King's College London. He contributed to an independent peer-reviewed study published last summer by the Ramazzini Institute. He believes it shows glyphosate herbicides should be treated with much more caution.
The latest evidence shows that the levels of glyphosate exposure that are considered safe are not safe. And that has been highlighted graphically in a recent cancer study in laboratory animals, which showed that the current acceptable daily intake of glyphosate, in other words, what regulators say we can ingest on a daily basis and not suffer any adverse effects, was still highly carcinogenic, causing leukemias, skin cancers, liver cancers, and so forth.
In animals?
In animals, but these animals always act as the surrogate for human health risk assessment. And what the animal studies have shown is that what was considered safe before is wrong. And therefore, the acceptable level in humans is also way off the mark and needs to be drastically reduced, in my view, by at least 100-fold.
Martin Lyons, farmer in Cambridgeshire and chief exec for the Nature Friendly Farming Network.
Even regenerative farming needs to use it because they use cover crops, which are grown to help protect the soil and put nutrients back into the soil. But you have to kill off those crops to grow your actual eating crop afterwards, don't you? So are there alternatives to its use?
I'm using different methods of cultivation, crimp rollers where we're trying to terminate cover crops by squashing them, and other methods, but we're finding problems with it and additional cost.
So you think that actually you should get paid better for producing those crops without using glyphosate because it's a system change on your farm?
Very much. I recognise it's a different cost. Additional cultivations are different methods, but also the products that are imported need to match the same standards we produce here. We are undermining UK farmers by importing at different standards. They're using far bigger rates of pesticides that we're illegal to use here.
Georgie Bray and farm manager at RSPB Hope Farm in Cambridgeshire.
You are looking after wildlife while producing food. How does glyphosate fit into that? Can you use it with a clear conscience if you need to and protect wildlife at the same time?
Alternatives to glyphosate use might be cultivations, it might be doing more topping and more mowing. And there are all implications of doing things, not just cost, but also on our carbon and our wildlife. If we've got ground nesting birds in there, that's going to impact them. And we've had big cover crops before that looked amazing, and drilling straight into them, you saw skylarks flying out of them, probably abandoning their nests, and that's not ideal either.
Nick, Pesticide Action Network, would you like to see glyphosate banned outright? And what would the consequences be for farmers actually who need to use it?
Eventually, yes, we'd like to see it banned. Immediately, we would like to see a ban of sales to the public. We'd like to see a ban of use in the amenity sector and a ban of use of pre-harvest desiccation, which would massively reduce the amount that's being used. Ultimately, do we need it? No, you don't need it. Do you use it? Yes. And I think a ban would help promote development of innovation because as a species we find solutions.
There was one person who asked a question. They're a regenerative farmer. They said they had cut their glyphosate use by 85%, but actually that last 15%, which is to kill the cover crops off, they cannot work without that last 15%. So a total ban would be detrimental, wouldn't it, to regenerative farming, which is supposed to be working with nature?
Well, they say they cannot work without it because they've still got access to it. if they didn't have access to it, the human species is a very innovative and inventive thing. We will find solutions. Not calling for an outright ban overnight, because there needs to be time to settle into new systems and find these solutions. But you need to set the direction of travel so people know what they're looking at and can actually start actively finding solutions to get rid of that last 15%.
Nick Mole from Pesticide Action Network. We asked the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs for their response. In a statement they said, like all pesticides, glyphosate is subject to strict regulation in Great Britain. Pesticides are only approved for use if the evidence shows that they won't harm human or animal health and won't have unacceptable effects on the environment. Now, all week we're talking about animal feed, from simple grass to complex proteins. Last summer was exceptionally dry in the Midlands, and many farmers there are now worried about whether they've got enough feed to last until spring. The hot weather significantly reduced yields for farmers such as Peter Brewer, who has a 70-strong dairy herd on his mixed farm near Ross-on-Wye in Herefordshire. Peter's had to buy in half the maize needed to feed his cattle. Normally he'd grow all of it on the farm. His store of silage, made from grass grown on the farm, is also significantly down. Bob Hockenhull reports.
Normally, sort of first cut grass silage, we'd look to make sort of 350, 400 tonnes to go into the silage pit. Then any surplus after that on subsequent cuts would go into round bales or hay, and we'd sort of normally make 700 to 800 of those bales. This year we only made 300, 350, I think. So we don't have that surplus to feed later on. So we didn't have any spring growth in the grass. We didn't have any grass through the summer, and it really impacted on the other crops, particularly our forage maize crop. That ended up being half the yield that we would normally expect. So we've ended up then buying in a lot of extra forage.
Presumably it's cost you quite a lot.
Buying in that maize has cost us about £20,000, and then the actual growing of the crop cost the same, but because the yield is half, it costs twice as much for what we've got in the pit. If spring's sort of 2 weeks late, then we're going to be looking at walls and floors and not having anything to feed the cows.
You'll have to fork some money out and buy some, presumably, will you?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're in the financial position now to buy any more in. We're in a fortunate position where we have grazing for the cows, so the only thing we will be able to do is turn them out onto less than ideal grass in bad conditions. If that's what it comes to, then that's what we'll have to resort to doing.
Did you have to reduce your stock a little bit because of what's happened?
We sold a lot of store cattle probably 6 months earlier than we normally would. So we sold them at the beginning of the autumn, knowing that we'd be short on feed through the winter. And we've also, unfortunately, lost quite a lot of cows in the last 12 months for TB. So that's reduced our herd number in the dairy cows. And we've been very reluctant to replace those numbers because we just don't have the feed to feed them.
If you face the same prospects of a really dry summer this year, what would happen then?
It doesn't bear thinking about. If we have another summer the same, I don't know what will happen, because feed costs will be astronomical. So the option of buying in feed probably won't be there because there's no surplus left anywhere.
Are many other farmers in this area in the same boat as you?
Every livestock farmer is in the same position now. A lot of farmers were buying in feed all last summer because they just weren't able to grow what they needed to on their farms. A lot of people have already eaten up their winter stocks, and they're just praying that they get a good spring and that they can ride it out. I think some people might have buried their heads in the sand a bit and thought, well, we'll just buy our ways out of it and hope that things fall in place. But I don't think that's going to happen too easily.
Peter Brewer there in Herefordshire. The government's promising a complete overhaul of the water system in England and Wales, which it says will protect households from disrupted water supplies and bring in tougher oversight of water companies. The new Water White Paper, launched by the government last night, proposes the abolition of the regulator Ofwat and a suite of new local water plans, which would consult farmers about river catchment area management. Mark Lloyd is Chief Executive of the Rivers Trust. I asked him how much difference the reshaping could make to the health of rivers.
I had a briefing with the minister yesterday, and I am hopeful that there are lots of things which are going to change and are going to change for the better. Whether it will be a massive reorganisation, I'm not sure. It's going to require some new resources. But yes, a cautious welcome for some of the measures that we've seen.
They do say the new reforms will bring councils, water companies, farmers and developers together to deliver joined-up local plans to tackle river pollution. And it seems that farmers aren't at the centre of this, but they are mentioned. So how significant is that?
Well, I think that's absolutely vital. And that's an approach that we've championed at the Rivers Trust through catchment partnerships, which have been poorly funded. But I'm pleased to see that they're going to get a little bit more money to do this job at a local level. But I think it's absolutely vital that we bring all sectors together. So I think it's absolutely vital to have farmers round the table to look at the ways in which pollution can be controlled. But also, I think, there's some really good opportunities for farmers and land managers in this reform that could bring new funding for flood protection, for drought resilience, for nature recovery and pollution prevention.
Where do you think that funding is going to come from, though? Does that mean private funding as well as public?
Yes, I think it does. So at the moment, a lot of the public funding that comes to farmers is through the much troubled SFI, etc. We'd like to see those payments much more directed to measures which would have a difference for water as well as for nature recovery. But we'd like to see more flood funding for natural flood management, for instance, coming to farmers and land managers alongside funding from water companies, who often the best way of controlling pollution is to do it on the land and preventing water getting into the sewage system in the first place. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for topping that up with private sector funding. The opportunity is there to bring public and private funding together around a really coherent plan for each river catchment.
Is there anything missing from this white paper that you'd like to have seen there?
I think I would have liked to see a more holistic view. A lot of it is focused on the water companies. That's understandable given the sewage crisis that we've seen, and it's been so much in the headlines. But I think I would have liked to see more emphasis on highways and chemicals and agriculture. It's a bit unbalanced. And I'd like to see more commitment to resourcing this system. We are very vulnerable as a country to drought and flood. So skimping and saving around a few £100 million in public expenditure is not what we need right now. We need really big commitment to this.
Is there anything that you would have liked to have seen mentioned specifically about agriculture?
Well, I think it looks like a bit of an afterthought. The Water White Paper is very high level. It's not very long. There's talk of a transition plan to follow. So I think the scope in that development of that transition plan to really embrace agricultural transition to a more regenerative system as part of these reforms, and really look at how we can solve multiple problems all at once rather than solving them one at a time in silos.
Mark Lloyd from the Rivers Trust. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.